Hey, thank you all so much for joining another episode of Celeste, the Therapist Podcast. My name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston, and I have a special guest with me. I'm going to have her introduce herself to you all.
Hello, Joanna and Edwards, mompreneur, entrepreneur with Thumbprint Realty, Thumbprint Cares. Good evening, good afternoon. Thank you so much, Celeste, for having me on.
Thank you for being here. So you mentioned mompreneur. I recently heard that name. Just tell people, what does that mean if they heard it and never heard it before?
Well, for me, what it means is a mom that's also an entrepreneur that wears many hats. So for me, being a real estate agent,
Clearly, right now she's wearing multiple hats. You see the
yes,
phones ringing.
right. Being a real estate agent, being a mom, being a business owner, being an investor, being a philanthropist. So encompassing all things that incorporate being a mom and an entrepreneur. So I didn't coin the phrase, but I definitely resonate with it as it aligns with all the things happening in my life.
Oh, nice. And I'm glad that you're here because not only do you have this nonprofit, you're in business, and I think a lot of times for women, especially Black women, we don't get to see that often, and or we'll see it where you either have to have one or the other. So it'd be a nice like conversation for people to think about because sometimes people never see themselves outside of what they've seen growing up. And I know making that transition is probably was a challenge for you over the years.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
So first, tell me a little bit about your upbringing. Where were you born and raised, and was schooling? Because I know you ended up going to college. Was that always part of your mindset?
So born and raised from Haitian immigrant parents who migrated here in the 80s. I am the youngest of three. And my upbringing was, if you know many Haitian people or many Haitian girls who grew up in a Haitian household, I would say my parents were moderately strict. I don't want to say they were extremely strict. I was able to do
Okay.
some things, but for the most part, grew up in a Haitian household, being the youngest girl, and the Haitian dream is to have your child go to school, get a degree. And of course, with the Haitian culture, oftentimes parents want their daughters to become nurses and their sons to become engineers. One of my brothers became an engineer. Nursing was not in the cards for me. I did attend nursing school, but I did not finish because it just wasn't my heart wasn't there. I was not passionate about it.
Wait,
But
so when you decided to go to nursing school, I know part of it was kind of felt like obligation. What made that switch for you where because some people stick it out and they struggle with it, but what made you switch it up?
it was guilt. And the thing about me going to nursing school, I had already got a bachelor's degree when I decided to go. I got a bachelor's degree in something completely different. And I felt like, although they were happy I got a degree, it wasn't like, oh, it's like, oh, she got
Right.
a degree in what? Criminal justice psychology, whoop de woo. She's not a nurse, right? So in the back of my mind, I still felt this guilt or urge to
Pressure.
like make my parents proud. So I started nursing school, and like halfway through, I'm like, I can't do it. I just can't do this. Like my heart's not in it. I'm not passionate about it. And so I'm actually still paying for nursing student loans for a school I did not complete. So my
Can I
parents,
just pause you really quick? Just for people that I'm very familiar with the Haitian culture because I'm married to a Haitian, and a lot of people I see are Haitian, so I've learned so much, right? And I work with people and helping them understand their parents' perspective around. In their mind, it's kind of like getting these certain degrees will allow you to survive, and they
right.
don't want their kids to suffer, but it does feel hard. And so I know even though Joanna this is years ago, able to make that switch, I know that, like she said, there was guilt involved of even going. And then making that switch was probably even harder. So I know there's a lot of people that struggle with
Oh yeah.
this during that age group, not just Haitian, Caribbean families, like people that are not from America, I think. A lot of times their families, when they come here, they want them to do certain things because they want them to be okay. I'm not saying it's right, the pressure they put on people, but I try to explain to people the mindset behind their parent, and what they're probably thinking. And I've talked to parents who I'm helping them see, you got to like think about what the kid wants, so you're not putting this wedge in the relationship. So I appreciate you sharing that piece, because that's a piece that a lot of people go through.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail right on the head. When Haitian parents or many parents think about these types of career fields, they're thinking about money. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
you'll be okay. You'll be able to,
Right.
these fields are lucrative enough where you'll be able to, live above your means, or you won't
Mm-hmm.
struggle. And
Mm-hmm.
I think at the time I was like, you kind of have a small minded mentality where you're like, okay, nursing could potentially set me off, set me to where I need to be, but it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
what I was passionate about. And I did not want to work graveyard shifts. I did not want to, at least if I'm doing something that I love, I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
feel the pressure of everything else that comes accustomed to it. But for me to do
Right.
something I don't want to do, and at the same time
Right.
have to, be miserable at the same time, like I just couldn't do that. And so, but I can say, that my parents, or my mom at least, understanding who I am today and what I do today and the life that I'm able to award myself and her, I'm sure my mom has shifted her mindset on
Yeah.
what success looks like, and broadening her mindset in terms of what other fields, what other career paths one can take to live a rather comfortable life. So but it took me kind of going through that journey with my parents
Yeah.
and exploring, and then realizing later on in life there are so many other things I could be doing
Mm-hmm.
to that are lucrative to give me the life
Mm-hmm.
that I want, which will give me the
Mm-hmm.
same outcome that she desired for
Mm-hmm.
me. So I'm pretty sure my parents are very proud of me today.
That's awesome. And when Joanna talks about the small mind, right? Because I had that same mentality. I was trying to get a state job, and they never would hire me. And I mean, I'm grateful that I didn't get hired, but my mind is like, go to a company, retire, and then, that's it. That's the way that I was brought up, thinking that's how life was. I never was around other entrepreneurs, so that
Yeah.
was never in my mindset until a therapist that was supervising me was like, oh, why don't you do private practice? And I just thought that was crazy, because I get sick in vacation time. When I
Yep.
look back and think about my mindset, I'm like, what was I thinking? But you only know what you know. The same way you talk about your parents, they only knew what they knew, right? And the more that you open your mind up to other possibilities, you can see it differently. So when we think about small mind, it's not that people are in nursing or want to choose a certain career path. I have a friend who's a nurse practitioner, and she's like, I don't never want to be in private practice. I just want my check and blah blah blah, and,
Right.
and that's
Yes,
fine.
that
So
work.
everybody's different. It's not
Yep.
that I'm pushing entrepreneurship only, but I'm asking people to like think outside the box, because you never know the levels that you can achieve. And and Joanna's a living witness of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and when you're talking about the introduction to entrepreneurship was never on my forefront. I came from a
Mm-hmm.
working class family, and my father worked two
Mm-hmm.
jobs. My mom worked. They worked more than they probably could or should to award us with a life of, going to private school and making sure
Wow.
that we had the best education. And they worked. All they knew how to do was work
This
hard.
work.
And
Yeah.
so it wasn't until because that was my mentality too. I always had two jobs. I always saved. I was
Yep.
like, I'm going to work and work and work, because that's how you feel proud of everything that you earn. Because I worked for this. I physically, mentally, and emotionally worked for this. And it wasn't until I met my husband
Mm-hmm.
and truly saw the true essence of what entrepreneurship was. And it took me a while to get there, because again, I was stuck in this mentality. My mom raised me to be an independent woman, work hard, never rely on a man, and that was
Mm-hmm.
embedded. And a part of me that's still kind of embedded in my head till this day. That's a whole
Mm-hmm.
nother story. But that's all I knew was to work hard. So,
Yeah.
what entrepreneurship means, and transitioning from a 9 to 5 to entrepreneurship, having a
Ooh.
family, that was a complete mind
Yeah.
shift. And so I had to, one, explain to my parents I was no longer going to do nursing, but two, the transition of telling them, well, guess what? I'm quitting my 9 to 5 job, and I'm going to. So that was a whole nother conversation that came with, what do you mean? Like, what is real estate been really for you to say that you're going to quit your job that has benefits? You have kids, you have health insurance. Like, what do you mean you're going to be a full-time, real estate agent? Like, what does that even mean for you? What does that mean for your husband? What does that mean for your family? How are you going to support yourself? Does that mean your husband's going to support you? Does that mean you don't get a check every week? So having to explain like there are other ways to make money, there are other
Yeah.
ways to be successful without being confined to a 9 to 5. And I, just like you, it took me, I was in the human services field for 15 years, doing a real tough job, but that came with great benefits. I wasn't paying for health insurance. My whole family was covered. Working for a hospital, you have great health insurance, great benefits. So I was stuck in that mindset for such a long time. Like, I really got to bet on myself when I become an entrepreneur. Like, I can't rely on this weekly check. I have to actually plan. I have to actually be organized. I have to, really make sure that I'm able to sustain some form of income over a long periods of times. And so when I established myself and was at a point where I felt really confident in my real estate business and everything I had going on, and to make that shift, knowing who I am and what was embedded in me my whole life, and knowing that all I knew how to do was work hard and save money, that was a big deal to be able to say, I'm quitting my 9 to 5 and I'm going to bet on myself and do real estate full time. And for my mom's very first question was like, how are you going to support those kids?
Yeah.
Don't ever put yourself in a position to rely on a man. I don't care if you're married or not. My mom was very old school Haitian mom. And, a lot of Haitian moms, they're like, I have a husband. I got my stash on the side that he don't know about. So I have things I don't know about. So are you prepared to be in a position where you're going to have to potentially rely on someone? Like, why would you do that? You've been so independent your whole life. And so I was very confident. I was very confident when I decided to quit my job to move forward and to go into entrepreneurship. And I'm so happy. I feel like that's the best decision that I've ever made. And I attribute that to meeting my husband, who was an entrepreneur at the time. And he introduced me to what that life looked like.
You talked about the real estate. You talked about being in a nonprofit. And I just want to go back a little bit, because you went to school for criminal justice and psychology, and you entered into the human service field. Was your plan initially criminal justice, or like how did the human service piece come into play with that criminal justice background?
The criminal justice, so yes, the human services piece came into play when I interned at a courthouse in the probation department. And, I really had a fascination with criminology at the time. And I was like, wow, I want to work with criminals. And it was a weird fascination. But, coming out of college, you kind of, when you're starting to enter the workforce, you kind of just take whatever jobs available that's semi-similar to the area of the field of interest that you graduated in. So my very first job was working as a victim witness advocate in the Middlesex District Attorney's Office, where I worked with victims of crime.
Oh, wow.
So I worked with the DA, the Assistant District Attorney's Office, and I kind of helped advocate for victims who were coming in, who were victims of crime. I kind of helped explain to them the criminal justice process, what happens when you go to court, how to advocate for yourself as a victim. I kind of helped the DAs prosecute cases. I did that for about 3 years, and the closest, and the pay wasn't great. So the closest other field to that was working as a domestic violence advocate. So I worked as a domestic violence advocate and then got promoted to program manager afterwards for about 10 years, working with victims, survivors of domestic violence in a hospital setting.
Oh, wow. That's not easy.
It's always not. And, and a lot of what I did was support. I provided, short-term counseling, crisis intervention. And then I eventually, transitioned into training physicians, social workers, and hospital staff on how to respond to domestic violence, how to be trauma informed when it came to patient care and domestic violence. It morphed over time, but essentially I was doing the work, working with survivors of domestic violence for 10 years straight. And that was my 9 to 5 that I transitioned from when I became a full-time real estate agent, a full-time entrepreneur. And so, and that was in a hospital setting, like I said. So doing that work took a lot out of me, because I was bringing a lot of secondary trauma home, vicarious trauma home. And, I'm sure as a therapist, you're very familiar with those terms and what the impact of that work could do to you as an individual. And it didn't make me desensitized to domestic violence. It made me hypervigilant. And it made me aware of a lot of the signs of domestic violence in relationships, in my counterparts' relationships, and my friends and my colleagues' relationships. And so, but it was very rewarding work in the sense of being able to understand and to advocate for I worked with hundreds of women, almost thousands of women over the tenure of my career. And I'm proud of that, but it was time for me to transition out of that field and to do something completely different, because I do believe that over time you can get burnt out. The work can have some impact on you as an
Oh
individual, can
yeah.
have impact on you in your personal relationships.
Yeah.
Um, I still have a soft spot for domestic violence survivors in my heart because I've been doing the work for so long. But
Yeah.
I knew that as I became a mom and as a wife, and hearing some of those stories, particularly to moms who are around my age, it hit me in a different way where I was like, I need
Yeah.
to transition out.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
Especially
Um,
hearing stories about sexual assault. So
yeah.
that was a big a light bulb for me and I was doing real estate while I was doing domestic violence work simultaneously for 3 years. So imagine being a mom, being a wife, doing domestic violence work, and doing real estate simultaneously as you're taking this work home. So a
That's a
lot.
lot. So it sounds like, just from our audience, just so they're following the story, it sounds like now you're in this field, but then you start dabbling in real estate a little bit
Yep.
on the side. And so now you're juggling two things.
Yep.
What was that like? Because this is you're a real person with a real story, and this is people's lives that literally are trying to make a transition like you are. And I remember when I had my nonprofit job and then opened my practice, I got so inundated, and I was like, my husband was like, you got to pick one, like which
Mm-hmm.
one? And I was like, oh my gosh, because it was like, you either gonna put all in here or here.
Yes.
And a lot of times I tell people that are dabbling in entrepreneurship or like feel a calling for it, I say, you already got disciplined habits for this company. Imagine if you created some further thing that you're doing on the side.
Amen. Amen.
So explain to people what that was like to be dabbling in it and then to make that final transition, because that's something that people are trying to figure out, how would that work for them?
Well, I will say that I had a lot of autonomy at this job as working as a domestic violence advocate. I had my own office. I had a lot of downtime per se, depending on how my clients were scheduled. So I was able to write offers. I was able to still schedule appointments. I was able to still be able to do the administrative side of real estate while I was there. But then when it came to showing property, I was, leaving my 9 to 5, then going at 6 p.m., 6:30 p.m., showing homes. On the weekends, I was showing homes. Meanwhile, I still have a husband. I still have a child I have to take care of. And so it became so cumbersome where I'm like, I didn't have time to fully commit to anything that had to do with me, because it was either real estate or it was doing domestic violence work. And God forbid I had a busy day at work where there was a family that came into the emergency room, had nowhere to go, and they're a domestic violence survivor. So I'm staying at work late until I figure out where this family's gonna go. Not to mention, I still have to get home at 8 p.m. to finish writing up this offer or to schedule showings. So it became so overwhelming that I wouldn't say I became depressed, but I would say I was so overwhelmed that I started having a hatred for the job that I was doing during the day, because I felt like it was hindering my real estate career. And so I was doing that consistently for 3 years. As I started to build more clientele for real estate and realized how lucrative it was, to the point where I was almost doubling my salary from my 9 to 5 job doing real estate, it became clear to me that the decision would be to do real estate full time. It comes
Yeah.
with less of the vicarious trauma. I have more flexibility with my scheduling, and I'm making double what I'm making at my
Right.
job.
Right.
So my advice to anyone who's thinking about entrepreneurship while you're still trying to figure things out is you have to kind of decide where the value is that you're getting from what it is that you're trying to do, that you want to become a full-time business owner. And
Mhm.
I had to assess, like, I have the potential to make double what I'm making. Well, actually, I was actually making double what I was making at my job. So that means I have the potential to make even more. So I'm already figuring out the financial piece. I'm already figuring out that I can own my time. I don't have any overhead. I don't have anyone creating my schedule for me. I don't have anyone telling me when to come in and when to come out. I have more time for my children. And so it was that defining moment for me that told me, okay, Joanna, you're able to do this. You've established yourself so well, and you see the potential of how much money you can make. You can confidently feel that it's time to walk away from your full-time
Mhm.
job. And I feel like that's the advice I have for anyone who is working a full-time job and they're dabbling into their business. You're able to assess, right? You're able to see, wow, how am I going to allocate my time? How much money can I potentially make? Will this cover me for the amount of time that I need to be covered? And would I be able to pay all my bills and some if I decide
Yeah.
to do my full-time job? And I was able to do that. And
Nice.
it was really time when I decided to walk away from my job, because I feel like the work was really taking a toll on me with the attachment piece that my clients had to me. And I felt like a part of why I stayed there so long was the guilt of
Yeah.
leaving my clients that were so attached to me, being the only Haitian Creole speaking advocate in that district, not only in the hospital, and
Amen.
also, the fear of losing those great benefits. But I had to
Yeah.
put myself first in that moment and think about my family and what's best for me and my family, and not put the needs of my clients before me at that time.
Yeah, and that's hard. I've been in the human service field all my life, and that one of the factors that deterred me at times was thinking about the other people. But then I tell myself, what would I tell my clients? Um,
Mm,
I also want to say, as Joanna's talk, because this is important, because there's so many people with podcasts and mics, and they're like, be an entrepreneur, quit your job, blah blah blah. I love the fact that you're sharing the strategic process, right? And even when I quit my full-time job, this is another option people can look at. I had my per diem job at the hospital, which, I was in the process of purchasing my second home, and I didn't have that full-time job, but the entrepreneur job had just started, so we couldn't use that income. But my per diem job was able to get me the approval for the second home. And also with the part-time job for people, it'll still allow you to get money coming in if you don't have enough to supplement, where you can get more of your time to the business. Because sometimes people think like they're failing because they have a job in a business on the side, and I'm like, no. Like, I tell people, that's how I started. I didn't just
yes,
come out and became a full-blown entrepreneur. You listen to Joanna talk about her process. So it's, sometimes people make it look very like simple and concise, like it's a straight line, and
no,
we're here to tell you it's not a straight line.
yeah, and I don't want to glamorize it either, but I left out a very important component in that time frame while I was working there. I did purchase my first home, an income producing home. While I was working, this is before I got married, I was there. So I literally was in nursing school at this job, met my husband at this job, got my master's degree at this. I literally, in that whole decade, I transformed at least 5 times at this particular
Dang.
job. But I did purchase my first home while I was working at this domestic violence job before I became a real estate agent. And I do want to add that that was another source of income for me to help me
Mm,
feel comfortable to transition as well. So,
yeah.
purchasing a home before I got married as a single woman, also working as a domestic violence advocate. So having that income come in also made the transition a lot easier for me because I had multiple streams of income. So I do want to add that as well.
Can we just touch really quick on, because you purchased the home as a single woman, and when it's interesting when I talk to a woman, and they're like, they're like waiting for this relationship, because that's the way it's kind of been framed in on TV and the movies and stuff, right? You don't I mean, now I think you're seeing it more, but you didn't typically, when you purchased your home, it wasn't a normal thing for a woman to be buying a home. What made you do that? Like, how did you get into, you seem like you're always an innovative thinker, because that was what you did was before your time. Women were not doing that.
It's so true. It's so true.
I
And I
wasn't
think,
even thinking, I would have never thought to purchase anything before I got married. It was like, when I get married, then get the house.
you know what? It was a few things. My upbringing, of course, being raised by a mom who always said, "Have your own." My brother, who was in college, he purchased his first property right after he graduated college. Was kind of like the pioneer for that. But most importantly, is when I met my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time. He already owned property. He bought his first property at the age of 20, and he kind of introduced the idea to me. He was like, "Listen, like you live at home." You have the opportunity to take advantage of a lot of these first time home buyers program. You have the money because you've been saving your whole life because you grew up in this household where they were embedded in you to save. I had I was 27 years old with almost $50,000 in savings, living
Dang,
at
you're a
home.
good saver.
Living at home. Remember, keep in mind, I'm working 2 jobs my whole life, living at home. You have a mom in your ear saying, never go broke and rely on a man. So, and I don't have any bills. So it was a no brainer at the time to get an income producing property and to remain living at home, right? And
Wow.
so it was the guidance of my boyfriend at the time, now husband, who said, he was a real estate agent, of course, and he already owned a home. So it was that conversation, and we were very intentional when we met about what we wanted to do and how we wanted to live our lives, and being so financially sound in that moment in our lives when we met and being so intentional. He was like, I already own a 2-family home. I a 3-family home, and just stack up. And I was like, okay, why not? So I was able to do that. Although I was making money, I was still working at my job, still trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was getting my master's at this point because I'm like, all right, nursing school didn't work out. Let me get my master's and see if my parents would be proud of me. Then. Let me get a master's degree. And so I'm telling you, in that 10-year period, I transitioned like how many times. But yeah, I purchased a home as a single woman because there are so many benefits in programs to leverage as a single person. There are less chances of you taking advantage of those programs as a married couple. And I know the mindset has shifted so much because we all grow up to go to school, get a job, meet Prince Charming, buy a house, have 2.5 kids and a dog, and live the rest of your life. And in today's society, women are not thinking like that. And
No, yeah.
I may have just been, the start of the progression of that shift, but a lot more women, single women, are buying homes. A lot more
Yeah.
single women are not waiting for Prince Charming. A lot more single women are waiting until they're in mid to late 30s to have children. A lot more women are really
Right.
invested in their careers. And so, in the mindset that I had at that point was I wanna secure the bag. And so, not knowing and not consciously thinking of that when I had my job, that purchasing this home was going to be the beginning of creating generational wealth and financial freedom. That wasn't my
Yeah.
mindset at the time. It was like stacking, but that
Yeah.
ended up being what started an amazing empire as an investor, as an entrepreneur, to purchase more homes, starting with that one home.
Wow. Wow. And so like I just talked about my part-time job and essentially Joanna having that income coming in was like that extra income. So for my potential or current entrepreneurs, just know like entrepreneurship journey doesn't have a like open and shut case. It's not like kind of like you want to be a nurse, go to school, then get through your clinicals, then pass the test, right? With entrepreneurship, it's trial and error, it's having grace.
Yes,
Joanna talked about all the ebbs and flows that happened over the 10 years at the job. And we have similar stories, I'm realizing, right? But it's like listening to her talk about the brother having the home and just what your environment is, it encourages you or discourages you. Right.
yes,
And so even if you don't have that brother or parent that's encouraging you, if you don't have that in your life, like there's plenty of books, podcasts, YouTubes. There's plenty of ways to get that knowledge. Like, don't use that as an excuse, right?
right.
Because there's some deficits that I've had and that Joanna has had, but I'm sure you don't get stuck in the barriers. It sounds like you try to look for the solutions and move forward that way.
Absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely, and being resilient. And I think you really hit the nail on the head by saying giving yourself grace, because I was really hard on myself with the whole nursing school situation, and really thinking like, what else can I do? Like, what else can I
Yeah.
do to feel fulfilled? What else can I do to, I don't want to work, in this field for the rest of my life. Am I going to be, 45, 50, still doing domestic violence work, making subpar income? Like, is this my life? Am I going to be working hard for the rest of my life? And it was through the transitions of my life, and meeting my husband and coming up with a plan on what my life, and there is no, you know, real exit plan in that moment. It was just kind of like trial and error, like you said. And,
Mhm.
just realizing, and having conversations with yourself, and when the time is right to move on to the next thing. I'm a loyal person by fault, by trade. Like, if I have a hairdresser, I'm gonna stick with that hairdresser for the rest of my life. If I have a boss, I'm loyal to you. And I was loyal for 10 years to a fault, where I kept thinking of all the reasons that I was going to be leaving that job and what they were going to be missing as opposed to what it was doing
What
to me.
you was missing. I
And
know.
so I had to really shift my mindset and think about how is this impacting me and where
Mm-hmm.
do I see myself going in the next 5 to 10 years? What do I want out of my life? And so being able to do both jobs or, be in two different career fields at the same time allowed me a little glimmer of light to see what the potential of life could be like just doing real estate. Being able
Mm-hmm.
to go to the doctor's in the middle of the day, getting a nail appointment or massage in the middle of the day. If I needed to pay a bill or whatever the case may be, I don't have to. I had to request days off just to go to a closing.
Yeah.
When I was it was like, oh, and then with real estate, it's so unpredictable. The closing gets
Yeah.
rescheduled. Oh, I really don't need that day off anymore. I need 2 weeks. I need another day off 2 weeks from now. So it became cumbersome to even
Yeah.
keep up with my real estate career while I was working because I wasn't awarded the freedom to just do things and get up and go. I had to request days off. And so being able to have the freedom that I have now to be able to do what I want to do and maintain my hours and maintain my schedule, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
And we're gonna get into her nonprofit Thumbprint Cares, but this is such a really I know I keep having questions about this entrepreneurship journey because it comes up a lot, and I just love your story. But I want to and I use these stories as like teaching tools for people that are listening. If you listen to Joanna, she asked questions, right? I say it's so important to ask yourself questions, like write out your plan, like visualize what you want it to look like. A lot of people only have in their mind what society says or what their parent have said, but they don't
Mhm.
really know what it is that they want. And through asking yourself questions, it's not like just sit down one time and ask a question and you may
Right.
not get it right in that moment, but I feel like God, if you believe in God, the universe will give you the answers through discernment with stillness. So really creating that intentional time to ask yourself questions, and then you'll start to see, oh, okay, I'm really good at this, or blah blah
Right.
blah. I promise you, and you heard Joanna, it sounds like her story didn't come in a package, and my story didn't come in a package. I never wanted to. I tell people all the time, I didn't even have my picture on my website because I was afraid to like all my pages was private. Like I was just a
Wow.
regular private person. So like coming out publicly the way I do was the passion that I have to help people. And I started to see the only way to like get my message forward is by getting my picture up. Then it was the
Right.
videos and everything that I'm doing. It was not planned out. So for people listening kind of on this journey, I really want you to hear the pieces of her story. And she's doing extremely well. And we're going to talk about her nonprofit and real estate and doing amazing things. But it didn't come that way. And the part about social media that I struggle with is that people will look at somebody's life and
Oof.
glamorize it,
Yes.
and that is not okay. Like
Yes.
I tell people to try to do better than what you did yesterday. You can like look at people for inspiration, but you never know their story, and so don't look at it in that way. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And you said that so eloquently and so beautifully in terms of glamorizing. And I stepped out of my shell, my comfort zone. I've always been a private person, contrary to who my husband is. He's an extrovert.
Wait, I gotta say something because when it was a post Joanna put maybe a year, and I had texted her. It was like I could tell it wasn't her because she reminds me of my husband, and I be trying to push him. I'm probably Alex to Jonathan. I'm probably Oh, let me just say it because people don't know what I'm saying. So her husband's name is Alex. So my husband is like Joanna, very quiet and private, and I'm like Alex, and so she had put up a post and it was like so not her, and I was like, oh my god, like I see you're trying to get out your comfort zone.
Oh man, how I'm still I'm very reserved. And I'm like, I don't like putting my business out there. I'm very
I
like,
know.
people, and my husband's like, put it all out there. And I was like, if you don't put it out there, how are people gonna know what you do? How are you gonna thrive in your real estate career? He's like, so many people resonate with you. So many people, people need to see, who you are. They need to see your personality. They can't just see you closing deals. They need to see. So, I decided, and the post that Celeste is referring to was me doing a voiceover to a rap song talking about real estate. But I'm very reserved and very like straightforward. So I was like, no, let me add a little personality to it. And it was my breakthrough to try to really, put some personality out there, because I'm very reserved, even to make my page, public, like you said. Like, oh, like I gotta, people gotta be in my business. Like I gotta post stuff. So my husband is like, he's in our house. He's showing our kids. He's like, this, I have that. We have this. We met on Match.com and blah, 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 blah. And so, it was through me opening up and being a lot more comfortable about telling my story and sharing my journey that he's right. I was able to, reach a broader audience and meet a lot more people who resonated with me, who wanted to do business with me, just me being who I am. So it was definitely a transition. And I don't want to at all glamorize real estate or anything, because of course, naturally as humans, we post the best parts of us. No one's out here posting their worst picture. No one's out here saying how bad of a day they had. Everybody wants to post themselves with the best angles, with the best filters, with the best outfit. No one wants to really show their bad side, right? So I think we need to keep that in mind as consumers, as individuals, when we're looking at stuff on social media. Just know that's 5% of their life, and that's 5% of their life on a good day. So don't ever think for once, you're in competition with people on social media, because no one's ever going to see their dark side. And that's something that we as individuals, we as women have to really understand and own our truth, walk in our purpose, be authentically us all the time. Because I don't want, when someone sees me on the street, they don't recognize me because of who they saw on social media. Like, what you see is what you get. I'm not going to put on the front for anybody on social media, because I want to be, authentically myself. But it did take some me opening up a little bit and realizing that people don't want to, do business with a robot. They want to do business with a human being. They want to know that you're a mom. They want to know you're an investor. They want to know that you're an entrepreneur. They want to know that you sometimes didn't always look your best or know what you wanted to do and you made mistakes. And so I think a little bit more and more, I'm trying to share that piece of me, so people can feel more comfortable in knowing, wow, she didn't just wake up one day and just, made six doing real estate. Like, that's not my journey at all.
Unless you're a trust fund baby, it doesn't happen that way. I appreciate you explaining that.
So it was like growing up in college. So I grew up in a working class family where, all they knew how to do was work. And so, being where I am now as an investor and, starting a real estate company with my husband, opening up Airbnbs, purchasing multiple homes, being a real estate agent, being an entrepreneur, all took time and phases and planning and a lot of trust in being able to know that I had the skill set to be able to do these things. Because oftentimes a lot of things we don't do is because we have a fear of failure. We have a fear of taking the next step, or we have a fear of the unknown. And I think when we challenge ourselves to just, push ourselves and bet on ourselves, sometimes we'll be amazed of our capacity and our capabilities and things we can do. And I would have never imagined, I would have never imagined this would have been my life, ever. Based on how I was raised and who I am, and I would have never imagined me meeting my husband on Match.com.
Yeah.
If you told me this 15 years, I would have been like, you're a liar. So it's just one of those things where you just like never, underestimate the power and the capacity that you have as an individual to do limits, and don't ever put a glass ceiling over your head. So
I'll just say this based off of what you said. Les Brown, he's a motivational speaker. He said a dog can only be a dog, a cat can only be a cat, but humans, the possibilities that we have. And unfortunately, like a lot of our dreams go to the graveyard with us, I think we all have been uniquely and wonderfully made, and we each have something in us that only we can provide to the world. And so it's interesting, like people are like, oh my God, it's so amazing what you do. And then I'll talk to people, they say, oh, I could play music just by listening, self-taught. I'm like, how the heck you do that? Everybody have their gifts, right? And the more that you ask yourself questions and pay attention to what's working, what's not working, I promise you'll get to that point where you'll understand what yours is.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about Thumbprint Cares. So you and your husband, you have this real estate business, right? That's called Thumbprint Realty.
Yep.
And basically, we know what a real estate company does, right?
Yes.
Not only are you guys a real estate company, you teach. My husband's a part of it, so I hear the meetings. Your husband's loud. My daughter's always talking about it when she's around. So you have this company, but also you guys do a lot of education, very You and your husband are very much into educating the community. I think one thing about the Black community is sometimes it feels like there's a lot of gatekeeping, and it's just
Mhm.
I love how you all are so willing to share and put people on. It's like you're rooting for everybody to win. Like you just want to see people win. Um, how did the nonprofit come? Thumbprint Cares, like where did that come from?
So Thumbprint Cares is the philanthropic arm of Thumbprint Realty. So back in 2017, the Thumbprint agents at the time, we maybe had about maybe 7 or 8 agents, and they all came up with the idea to do a backpack giveaway. They was like, let's all pool some money, buy some backpacks, and give it away to the community. So we did it one year, just in our small little office. I think we had about like 70 bags, and the outpouring of the community, just with the 70 bags that we had in some like maybe 5 boxes of pizza in our office. And we saw the need and the demand. I was like, if we could do this on such a small scale, imagine what we can do on a greater scale. So I said, all right, Thumbprint Realty is the one that put this on. So clearly Thumbprint Cares, let's call it Thumbprint Cares. I applied for the 501c3 application to become a certified nonprofit organization. And from that point on, we decided that we wanted the mission of Thumbprint Cares to be to empower action-driven individuals in the urban community to close the wealth gap, not only through home ownership, but through community service and financial literacy as well. And so we wanted to pour into our community as a real estate brokerage to not only be a bridge to streamline backpacks and Christmas toys, but to also pour into the community and provide education and financial literacy, because that's the gateway to home ownership. The end goal should be home ownership, but we also want there to be a pathway to home ownership by providing financial literacy. Prior to COVID, we were hosting financial workshops every month, getting the city of Boston to come out. We were getting banks. We were partnering with so many communities to come to our office to educate people in this neighborhood. Oftentimes, people in this neighborhood are saying, like
We
you
don't
said,
know.
they're gatekeepers. We don't know that you can get down payment assistance. We didn't know the city of Boston has programs for seniors. They have programs to help provide you opportunities to repair your homes. We didn't know that you can do estate planning. I didn't know I can create a will. And so we said, you know what? We're going to be the bridge, and we're going to be the resource for you, and we're going to bring the information to our community. The city of Boston had mentioned that they don't have enough money to advertise all the resources that they have. So they basically rely on word of mouth. And that's just not enough. That's not enough to get the people in our community who are so desperately in need for this information to make the change, to move the needle. We're not making any progress. So we took it upon ourselves to host these workshops every month, and we would have food, and we'd have people come in the community and say, we're going to have a representative from the city of Boston come and speak. We're going to have a representative from this particular bank to talk about how to open up a bank account. We're going to have a representative from this mortgage company to tell you how to apply for a loan, how to get down payment assistance, in conjunction with hosting backpack giveaways and Christmas toy giveaways and turkey giveaways. And we're really intentional with every single event that we host to incorporate some form of financial literacy in either the backpacks or the Christmas toy giveaways. This past August, we gave away 500 backpacks to 500 families.
Dang.
And we had vendors there who we were really intentional about putting information in the community that we wanted to put out, whether it was employment, whether it was education, whether it was about home ownership, whether it was about enrolling your child into private school, whether it was about enrolling your child into Girl Scouts. We were really intentional about the impact. If you have the capacity to bring a great amount of people together, what are you going to do with the information that you're going to provide these people? You have the capacity to change lives by bringing people together. So be really intentional about the information you're pouring into the community. You can gather 500 people for a festival. You can gather 500 people for, a food festival or a music festival. If you could gather 500 people and change their lives and put information in their hands, and they could leave with more than they came with, you're providing impact. And so essentially, that's what Thumbprint Cares does, is we are intentional about providing impact via financial literacy, home ownership, and service with our events.
That's dope. I love what you're doing. And Joanna mentioned financial literacy a million times in that one blurb. And that's such an important missing piece that our community struggles with. I always talk about, like, once I turn 18, the credit cards start coming and I would start swiping. And I remember my husband would be like, but that's not your money. And I'm like, I didn't even understand what he was saying. I was like, what's wrong with him? Don't he see my name on his card? My name on the card, that's my And so I ain't know nothing about interest rates. Like I was just swiping, paying the
Oh my
minimum.
gosh.
The money kept going higher. Now I'm stressed out because I got all these credit card bills and these
Right.
credit card companies calling me for stuff I purchased that I ain't even need. Um,
Exactly. As simple as
and
that.
but so it's simple, but when you only know what you know. And
Right.
so if you grow up without any money and then all of a sudden you get this like $500 limit or $1,000 limit, you think you're doing it, but you ain't doing nothing but putting yourself in debt.
Exactly. Exactly.
Um, and I will always tell people about the things what you're doing. Like let's say I attend that event. Even if I don't make changes that day, I got the literature. I'm looking at it, right? You
Yes.
planting a seed, right?
Yes.
So for people that are listening to this, and I love the idea on the way you're thinking it. Like, yeah, people are gonna come get the backpacks, get the stuff, but also, bam, I'm gonna hit you with a little bit of knowledge
Right.
because who knows, like a year from now, they may be ready to start that budget. I started following because I wanted to get more invested in financial literacy. I started following more financial people on social media.
Mhm.
And then I would get these little blurbs. And before you know it, like I'm changing my mindset because
Right.
like I started off at the beginning of the session that you and I are talking about. It's important to surround yourself with knowledge. My mom was always a saver, but she never communicated her process, right? So we've never went without financially. But then like I turned 18 and then now I'm just like out here winging it. And so, and I'll say, and I'll let you follow up with whatever you want to add to it. But I'll say this. I remember sitting down and feeling like ashamed and embarrassed about having to get an advisor and just kind of like trying to figure out this process. And then I had to stop and think, like, what you embarrassed for? You ain't know. Like,
Right.
you
Right.
need to like, if I was researching about getting some J. Cole tickets, everybody know I love J. Cole.
Listen.
I
Right.
wouldn't be embarrassed about trying to figure out what
Right.
I don't know. And so for people around this financial literacy piece, because there's a huge wealth gap in the Black community, and it wasn't by
Yes.
accident, right? We know there were systems put in place, but also we don't have to allow that to stop us from learning and educating ourselves around it. So really being mindful that it's okay to not know, right? Because once you realize you don't know, guess what? You can start looking for the answers. And I tell people, if you start today, this time next year, you'll be in a different space, you
Exactly.
know?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
meeting people where they're at. I think a lot of what we're intentional about is, what type of literature we're putting and making sure that people are able to understand and comprehend it. I'm not
Yeah.
putting a bunch of paperwork in front of you where you don't understand the jargon or you don't know what the
Right.
terminology is. We were able to get 200 comic books donated from Chase Bank that was really a story about how to budget, kid friendly, very
That's
easy to
dope.
read, easy to learn.
Yeah.
We also got 500 books donated from Storytime Crafts, all by Black authors who were
Wow.
teaching children about how to become millionaires, how to save,
Wow.
understand the value of a dollar. So we were really, really intentional this year about the types of literature and making sure that a lot of the books were reflective of the community that we were serving. And I want to shout out Storytime Crafts for thinking of us and donating these books because it was really instrumental to see these families and how they were hovering over books. Like there were tons of free things being given out, but
I
books
love
with black
that.
and brown kids on there talking
I
about, you know,
know.
how Johnny was able to open up his, lemonade stand and how he started that and what the principles were to start that. Like that stuff is huge. I
Yeah.
think, oftentimes it's so easy to say we're providing financial literacy, but we have to be intentional about how we're communicating that and how it's received. Because if they're not able to take it and do anything with it, what did you really do? You
Yeah,
know?
that's
And so
true.
if they're able to read it, they're able to comprehend it, and they're able to apply it, then I know I could feel better about going to sleep at night because it was impactful in that way. So, being intentional about how that information is provided and how it's received is really, really important when we're providing our events. And so financial literacy can look a lot like a lot of things. But again, even when people are coming into our office to attend these workshops, it's finding out who these people are. Who are you? what brought you here today? What do you actually need help with? What can you leave here that's valuable that you can apply to your life tomorrow? Not just a bunch of paperwork that I'm going to shove in your face and tell you go ahead and change your life. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
I think when you're doing nonprofit work, when you're doing education, and when you're doing financial literacy, is really meeting your neighborhood and meeting your peers where they're at, so the information is applicable and they can apply it and actually make real change. And I think that's what makes us a little bit different in terms of what the methods are that we choose to provide this information, because we really want to provide more impact than anything.
Oh, that's good. And even though you kind of took a shift in your career, all of the stuff I'm listening to your story, all of the things you've done, the project manager and just the casework, like you kind of leveled up. It
Oh, yeah.
actually helped you in your business now. Like I could see how you're using those same skills where you're meeting people where they are. And I think about people struggling with domestic violence and how you really you can't talk to them a certain way. You can't, like, there's certain things that you couldn't do to somebody else because their whole system is in this like kind of fearful state. And so from that, I know you learned a lot about how you've been applying it to your current career.
Tremendously. And it was weird because I never really thought about it like that. And it wasn't went throughout with me writing my bio that I'm like, the trajectory was really easy, because when you're working with survivors, you have to be empathetic. You have to not victim blame. You have to meet them where they're at and speak their language. And I think oftentimes if someone's already at their lowest, they don't want to hear how anything was their fault or how they put themselves in that predicament. You have to be more solution oriented than pointing fingers at why they're in that situation. So you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of these big corporations, the reason they're not able to be effective when they're coming into these communities is because they're not meeting people where they're at. You're coming in with a 3-piece suit and you don't look like the people that you're serving. How do you expect them to feel like they can resonate with? And so I think you're absolutely right. A lot of the tactics and the approaches that I use, I can definitely say come from me providing a lot of direct service and human services in the human services field, working as a domestic violence advocate. Absolutely.
Yeah. And for people listening, like, you may not, like, a lot of the skill sets that you're using now that you may be looking into something else. You may not see the correlation. You see, Joanna didn't see it until she wrote her bio.
It's true.
I think because I'm a therapist and I listen, like, my skill set is really making connections. As people are sharing their story, I'm able to see the connection. Like, okay, that even my story, like, I see how it added up. And so a lot of times you may not understand what's happening, but I do feel like it works for the good eventually. Yep. That's just kind of like my process. So this was amazing. It's so interesting because I wanted to talk about Thumbprint Cares, and we got to talk about it, but also just your entrepreneurship journey. I think it's a story in and of itself that I needed to like elaborate on and let people hear. But as you're talking, I just find it fascinating because I talk to people that have been in different pieces of your life and the struggle that they have. So, I have as a podcast host, I have an advantage because of the work that I do. So I'm able to pull from people's stories and help make connections to help my audience learn. So I'm really grateful for you. Is there anything else you want to add? How do you juggle it all like that? Like your self-care piece, like what does that look like for you, for people that may be wondering?
Great question. I think what I ended up doing earlier this year, which you were able to help me out with, was get a therapist. Because I think oftentimes as moms, as women, we feel like we have this superhero complex where we could do it all and we don't need any help. And I was very guilty of that.
Sorry, let me just pause you for a second. Also, society, there's systems in place that have us feeling this way, not just systems, but we watched our parents, especially as Black women. And, I talk to a lot of Black women for a living, and we'll go into a job and we'll know what to do and we'll fix it and we'll like clean it up and do all these things. But then when we get home, we have nothing left to give. So that kind of mindset, it wasn't like we just created it, but there's things, because I always want people to understand the systems, because I feel like we do a lot of blaming individually in this society, and we don't talk about how there's these systems that we have to really be intentional on getting our mindset into a different space so that we can actually live a fulfilling life. But go ahead.
Oh yeah, like you're a mom, you're strong, you're a
Mhm.
woman, you're black. You're supposed to do it all. You're supposed to carry it on. You're supposed to carry it on your back. And I think it wasn't until I was able to really realize that I could not do it all, and it
Mhm.
was self sabotage. And it's like you want to be great at everything. You want to be a great wife. You want to be a great mom. You want to be a great daughter, especially coming up when you have elderly parents. That's a whole other responsibility that people don't talk
Yeah.
about, in addition to taking care of your children, having a career. So what I ended up really having to do was putting myself on a schedule. I had to put my own self, just like
Yeah.
how I put, taking the kids to dance,
Client. Yeah.
meeting a client at 2 p.m., having to do this. I had to literally put myself on a schedule and say from 8
Yeah.
to 11 a.m., this is what you're going to do. This is your
Yeah.
time. This is the
Yeah.
time that you have to go to the gym. This is the time that you have to regroup. This is the time that you get to sit in silence and think about
Mhm.
what you want to do. Simple as that. And I think once I was intentional about putting myself on a calendar, just as much as I put everything else on the calendar, I was starting to realize where the deficits were. I was starting to realize who I was again, where I was, I wasn't able to pour anymore, when my cup was actually empty, it was actually
Mhm.
fulfilling. And I found that when I'm fulfilled in things that I like to do, I'm more productive, right?
Mhm.
If I'm able to do things that I like, if I'm able to do things that make me feel full, then I'm able to pour into my husband, and I'm able to pour
Mhm.
into my mother, I'm able to pour
Mhm.
into my children, I'm able to pour into my clients.
Mhm.
But if I'm feeling frustrated about things that I wasn't able to complete the night before, the pound of laundry,
Yeah.
because I didn't feel comfortable outsourcing, because I feel like less of a woman if somebody else is doing my laundry or cleaning my house or cooking my meals. I had to be comfortable with relieving
Yeah.
tasks and saying
Yeah.
it's okay to outsource to have a cleaner come
Yeah.
into my house. It's okay to outsource to maybe have someone cook a few meals and
Yeah.
meal prep. It's okay, to do these other things to relieve some pressure off of me, so I had to have the capacity to be, a full-time agent, a full-time
Mhm.
wife, mom. And so
Mhm.
I think to be able to balance, and one thing my therapist taught me with my very first session is that society always uses this word balance, 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 but we can never truly balance, because not one thing is always going to have the same amount as the other. I
Right.
can't fully
Right.
be 100% mom, 100% wife, but she
Right.
used the word harmonize. And
I like
sometimes
that.
you can work in harmony with all the different
Mhm.
aspects of your life, even though one
Mhm.
may be getting one aspect of the other. But as long as you're able to harmonize, you'll
Mhm.
be more productive in what you're able to give and what you're able to do.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of really the essence of how I'm able to do everything I'm able to do, is understanding and not feeling guilty that maybe one thing is getting more aspect of my time, but being able to do that one thing well and giving it the best that I could in that moment and not feeling guilty about it. And so I think that's how I'm able to kind of keep pushing forward and being able to do what I'm able to do and wear these multiple hats, is not giving myself grace, of course, but understanding that not everything's balance but harmony.
Oh, I love that. And I remember when I started working from home in the beginning of 2020, and I would make my Fridays like half a day, and then I would literally have to close my computer. I would feel like so, because once you get to this entrepreneurship journey, there's always work. There's never
Right.
not
No
any work to
boundary.
do.
Exactly.
And so if you don't create boundaries, and I tell people this all the time, put yourself on your calendar and make it non freaking negotiable.
Right,
And as
right,
Joanna is saying, when she's pouring into herself, she's able to give freely, like differently. And
right.
people will look at all the hats that I wear, they'll be like, oh my gosh, like how do you, people always ask me, how do you do it? And I said, honestly, I start my day with me. I literally start, and I
Literally,
promise you, when I do that, the way I give looks 100%
it
different.
does. It
And
does.
so like I just want to encourage not just, I mean, men and women, but I like have a passion for women, especially Black women, because I see how we put the weight of the world on our shoulders. We be making these companies grow, and our friends, our family, we be out here doing it, but then inside we be struggling. And so
So
I was that
true.
person, and when I started to shift my mindset and realize just cleaning, I've been cleaning, and that's if you can afford it, obviously. But
Right, right,
I
right.
remember it's like, oh, why would you do that? And it's just like, because I get my time back. And
Yes,
so if there's ways to outsource like any kind of task, like look at that and be okay with that, because then you're getting like you're getting more space in your mind to think and breathe and be free. And
absolutely,
that's something that a lot of times Black women, we don't know what that looks like. We really struggle.
absolutely,
So
absolutely.
um Yeah, this was
Oh,
amazing.
this is good. Thank you so
Let
much.
people know how they can find you if they want to learn more about Thumbprint Cares, Thumbprint Realty, and then also the information will be in the show notes for people that just want to click on it.
Yeah, so Thumbprint Cares is Thumbprint Cares on Facebook, Thumbprint Cares on Instagram. I'm Joanna N. Edwards on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Thumbprint Realty has its own real estate page, so really easy to find. Again, I'm an open book. I love to share my story. I love to share, my journey in terms of how to empower other women who are seeking the road to entrepreneurship and being a mompreneur. I've gone to have a real passion in just seeing how I've transformed in this journey, and I'm happy to share and connect with anyone who is inquiring or just wants to learn more.
Well, this was awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you and your time. And I know so many people are going to find value in all the nuggets that you dropped for us today. So thank
Thank
you.
you so much for having me. I just want to just give you your flowers for just having a platform where we're able to share our journey and just finding
Thank
the
you.
correlation in anything that anyone's doing to kind of lead it back to either mental health or self-care.
Yeah.
And I just want to commend you for the great work that you're
Thank
doing.
you.
And you are a pillar in the community. You are so needed, and you've been helpful to me in my journey in finding a therapist. And so just thank you for just
Thank
being
you.
you and having this
Aw,
platform.